The vault was buried 3 floors beneath the casino, accessible only through fingerprint recognition and a code that changed daily. Viktor Sokolov had designed it himself, impenetrable, invisible, a fortress for secrets that could destroy empires. He was descending the marble stairs at midnight when every light in the corridor went dark simultaneously. His hand moved to his weapon, but before he could draw it, the vault door was already open. Impossible, completely impossible, and silhouetted against the glow of security panels stood a girl no older than 9, her small fingers still pressed against the biometric scanner. "Don't shoot," she said in accented English, her voice carrying a composure that belonged to someone decades older. "My name is Sofia, and I came to steal something that was stolen from my family." Viktor's blood turned to ice. Impossible. The vault was sealed. The security was absolute. And yet this child, this impossible child, stood in his most protected space holding a photograph in her trembling hand, a photograph of someone he'd spent 15 years ensuring no one would ever find. And now his entire world balanced on the edge of a 9-year-old girl's revelation. Viktor Sokolov is the 52-year-old patriarch of the Sokolov crime empire, operating from São Paulo, Brazil. He's a man of calculated elegance and absolute ruthlessness, built his organization through strategic alliances and a code of silence that no one dares break. He believes he's untouchable until a girl appears in his most secure location. Sofia Marchetti is a 9-year-old with haunted eyes and impossible knowledge. She claims to be the daughter of someone Viktor supposedly eliminated years ago, someone whose death was documented, verified, and buried. Sofia's sudden appearance isn't random. It's orchestrated by someone inside his inner circle. The setting is Viktor's private casino in São Paulo, a fortress of luxury and surveillance where Sofia has somehow bypassed every security system. The power dynamic is inverted. A child holds information that could destroy a man who spent decades ensuring no one ever threatens him. And Sofia knows far more than she should. The vault was buried 3 floors beneath the casino, accessible only through fingerprint recognition and a code that changed daily. Viktor Sokolov designed it himself, impenetrable, invisible, a fortress for secrets that could destroy empires. The security system was military-grade, installed by the same engineers who'd protected government installations. No one had ever breached it. No one ever would. At midnight, every light in the corridor went dark simultaneously. Viktor's hand moved to the gun at his hip, a reflex honed by 30 years of surviving threats. He'd been descending the marble stairs when the blackout occurred, his footsteps the only sound in absolute darkness. His men would be mobilizing. The backup generators should have engaged within seconds. They didn't. The vault door was already open when the lights returned. Impossible, completely impossible. A small silhouette stood inside the vault, framed against the glow of security panels. A girl, no older than 9, Viktor estimated, with her small fingers still pressed against the biometric scanner. She wore a burgundy coat that had seen better years, and her dark hair was pulled back severely. When her eyes met his, Viktor saw something that made his blood turn to ice, a gravity that didn't belong in a child's face. "Don't shoot," she said in accented English, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "My name is Sofia, and I came to steal something that was stolen from my family." Viktor's weapon remained drawn, pointed at the child's chest. His mind cycled through possibilities: a rival organization, a test of security, an elaborate trap, but nothing made sense. The vault required biometric data that only existed in his system. The fingerprint scanner was encoded with his DNA. The girl should have been unable to trigger anything. "How did you open that door?" His voice was level, but underneath the words was the sound of a man whose absolute certainty had just fractured. "I was given the code," Sofia said simply, "by someone who knows how your systems work, someone who's been watching you for a long time." She extended a photograph with a hand that barely shook. Viktor didn't take it. Instead, he pressed the emergency alert on his wrist. Within seconds, his security chief, Marcelo, appeared in the corridor with 4 armed guards. "Search her," Viktor commanded. "Tell me everything she's carrying." The guards approached carefully, as if the child might detonate. What they found was meticulously organized. The photograph, a leather journal with pages marked and annotated, a birth certificate, medical documents, and a sealed envelope with his name written in handwriting that made Viktor's world tilt sideways. Handwriting he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. "Leave us," Viktor said quietly. Marcelo hesitated. "Mr. Sokolov, this is clearly a security breach of." "Leave us now." When they were alone, Viktor finally took the photograph from Sofia's hands. The image was faded, colors washed out by time. It showed two people, a younger version of himself, dressed in the expensive arrogance of his early criminal years, and a woman. A woman with dark hair and eyes that held an entire lifetime of conviction and truth, and everything Viktor had spent 15 years learning to destroy. "Isabella." "She's dead," Viktor said flatly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of absolute fact that had become the foundation of everything else. "Your mother, if that's even who she is, Isabella is dead. She died in 1997, car accident." "That's what you were told," Sofia replied, and her voice carried the weight of someone who'd rehearsed these words 1,000 times. "But she wasn't dead. She was hiding. She was alive, and she was waiting, and she was raising me." Viktor opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated November 1997. "If you're reading this, and you don't recognize my name, then you've become exactly what I was afraid of. My name is Isabella Marchetti, and I loved a man named Viktor Sokolov. I loved him enough to let him go when I understood that the life he was choosing would destroy us both. This is the record of what happened after." He skipped forward through entries, years of her handwriting, entries about escaping São Paulo, entries about learning she was pregnant, entries about watching Viktor's rise through the criminal underworld, each news report another death of the man she'd known. And entries about Sofia, birth, first words, first steps, birthday after birthday, a mother documenting the child she was raising alone while the father built empires of violence across South America. "How did you find me?" Dmitri asked, though part of him already knew the answer would complicate his life in ways he couldn't yet foresee. "My mother left instructions," Sofia said. "When she got sick, she left everything. Journals, documents, photographs, and a name, the Oracle. She told me that when the time was right, the Oracle would help me find you." "And did this Oracle bring you here?" "He arranged it," Sofia confirmed. "He gave me the access codes. He told me what to say. He said you would refuse to see me unless I came in person, unless I showed you proof, unless I made it impossible for you to deny that I exist." Viktor moved to the window overlooking São Paulo's glittering skyline. Millions of lives moving through the night, without knowing that the man looking down at them had just had his entire understanding of reality fractured by a 9-year-old girl. "Your mother," he said slowly, "is she here in São Paulo?" "She died 6 weeks ago," Sofia said, and for the first time her composure cracked. Her voice trembled slightly. "Cancer. It started in her lungs. She was in pain for a long time, but she wanted to stay alive long enough to make sure everything was documented, long enough to make sure I would be safe." Viktor closed his eyes. Isabella, alive all these years. Isabella, raising their daughter. Isabella, documenting the empire he'd built while she wasted away from cancer in some hidden location while he was celebrating victories and consolidating power. The guilt was suffocating. "What does the Oracle want?" Viktor asked. "Because people don't infiltrate fortresses and send children into sealed vaults out of charity. There's always an angle." "The Oracle wants you to know the truth," Sofia said. "About yourself, about what you've become, about what my mother never stopped believing you could be." "And what's that?" "Someone who can choose differently." Viktor turned to face her fully. This small girl with her mother's eyes and her mother's quiet intensity, standing in the middle of his vault like she owned it, like she'd been born knowing she had the right to exist in his world. He pressed the emergency alert again. Marcelo appeared immediately. "Secure the girl in the North Tower," Viktor said. "Private suite, everything she needs, food, clothes, anything she asks for. And Marcelo, If anything happens to her, if even one person in this organization causes her a moment of discomfort, you will answer to me personally. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Marcelo paused. "Sir, what about the Oracle if they contacted?" "They'll contact us," Viktor interrupted, "because now we have something they want, and I need to know exactly who this Oracle is and what they're planning." After Marcelo left with Sofia, Viktor returned to the journal. He read late into the night, moving through 15 years of Isabella's life in written form. He read about her fear, her hope, her unwavering belief that somewhere inside the man he'd chosen to become, there was still someone capable of change. He read an entry from just weeks before her death. "Sofia asks me why I didn't tell her father about her. She's too young to understand that some loves have to be sacrificed for survival. But maybe she's also old enough to understand that her father made a choice, and now I'm making a choice for her. I'm giving her the chance to know him. Not the man he became, but the man he could have been. Whether he takes that chance, that will be his choice to make." Dmitri sat in darkness as dawn broke over São Paulo, holding the journal of the woman he'd abandoned, raising the daughter he'd never known existed, and understanding with absolute clarity that his empire had just become secondary to something far more dangerous. A reason to reconsider everything. São Paulo, Brazil, March 1997. The documentary screening was at the Cinemaca, a converted mansion in the Consolação neighborhood. Viktor had been sent by Cardinal Ramirez to gather intelligence on a journalist who was becoming problematic. Her name was Isabella Marchetti. She'd been investigating police corruption for 3 years, and her latest documentary implicated men who protected Viktor's organization. She was also the most beautiful woman Viktor had ever seen. The screening room was packed: activists, journalists, university students. When Isabella appeared on stage to introduce her film, she moved with the conviction of someone who believed that truth mattered more than safety. The documentary itself was devastating. It showed police officers accepting bribes, protecting trafficking networks, ignoring murders. It showed the systematic corruption that allowed organized crime to flourish in São Paulo. It showed, indirectly, the world Viktor was part of. After the screening, he waited outside the theater. It was reckless. It was exactly what Cardinal Ramirez would have forbidden. But when Isabella emerged, Viktor stepped forward. "Your film was remarkable," he said in Portuguese, his accent placing him immediately as someone not from São Paulo. "Dangerous, but remarkable." She studied him, this young man in expensive clothes that tried too hard to announce wealth, with violence barely hidden beneath his careful politeness. "What's your name?" she asked. "Viktor Sokolov." Her expression shifted. She'd heard the name. Everyone in São Paulo had heard of Cardinal Ramirez's new lieutenant, the young man becoming infamous for his ruthlessness. "You work for Cardinal," she said flatly. "I do." "Then you should leave," she said, but she didn't move away. Instead, she stood there in the warm São Paulo night, her dark eyes challenging him. "Unless you came to threaten me." "I came because watching you speak about truth made me remember that there are things in this world more important than power," Viktor replied. The honesty surprised both of them. She smiled then, a sad smile that held the weight of someone who'd already understood that people like Viktor didn't survive to become something different. "Then you're more dangerous than I thought," she said. "Because if you understand that, and you still work for Cardinal, it means you've already decided that power matters more." Over the next 4 months, Viktor showed up at every event Isabella organized. He attended her lectures at the university. He went to her apartment in Vila Mariana, listening to her talk about corruption, about justice, about the resistance movements working to expose São Paulo's criminal networks. And Isabella loved him, not the version of him that Cardinal wanted, but the version underneath, the boy who still remembered that beauty mattered. "Come with me," Viktor said one night as they lay on her apartment balcony, looking out at São Paulo's sprawling darkness. "Leave the country, leave South America. We could go somewhere where your past doesn't matter, where we could build something clean." For a moment, she considered it. He could see it in her eyes, the fantasy of a different life. A life where she made documentaries about art instead of corruption, and Viktor was just a man, not a lieutenant in a crime organization. "I can't," she finally said. "My sources depend on me. The resistance movement depends on me. If I leave, everything I've documented becomes meaningless. The people I've been protecting lose their voice." "And I can't leave Cardinal," Viktor said. "If I try to walk away, he'll have me killed. He'll have you killed." "Then we're trapped," Isabella said simply. "Not if we run now. Tonight we could." "No," she interrupted. "We couldn't, and you know that. The moment we tried to leave, Cardinal would find us. He wouldn't allow you to escape alive, and he'd torture you before he killed you just to remind everyone what happens to traitors." Viktor pulled her close, and she held him, and they both understood that this was the end of something before it had ever really begun. 3 weeks later, Cardinal Ramirez called him into his office. "You're distracted," Cardinal said flatly, lighting a cigarette. "You're spending time with a woman, a journalist named Isabella Marchetti." Viktor's blood turned to ice, but he said nothing. "I'm going to give you a choice," Cardinal continued. "The organization or the girl, you can't have both. The woman has exposed people I work with. That makes her a liability. That makes you a liability if you continue this relationship." "And if I choose her?" Viktor asked, already knowing the answer. "Then I kill you both and move on. I have 20 men who could do your job. But I've invested in you, Viktor, so I'm offering you a choice. Walk away from her, completely. Never contact her again, and I'll let her live. You'll never see her again, but she'll live." Viktor made the choice that would define his life. He chose power. He chose the organization. He chose to become the man Cardinal was molding him into, and he chose to do it by erasing the only person who had ever made him believe he could be something different. He went to Isabella's apartment and told her he didn't love her. He told her it was an assignment, that he'd been using her for information. He told her that she meant nothing to him, and that if she tried to contact him again, he would have her arrested for her investigative work. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with such profound sadness that Viktor realized he'd already become the thing he'd always feared, a man so broken that he could destroy the most beautiful thing in his life just to survive. 2 months later, Cardinal told him that Isabella was dead. "Car accident," Cardinal said with a smile that suggested satisfaction. "A tragedy, really, but it's no longer your concern. She's gone, and you're free to focus on the organization." Viktor believed him, and he spent the next 15 years believing that the woman he loved had died because he'd chosen wrong. He spent 15 years turning that guilt into fuel for his rise through the criminal underworld. He spent 15 years becoming exactly the man Isabella had feared he would become. He never knew that she'd escaped, that she'd used her journalism network to flee Brazil, that she'd carried his child and raised their daughter in hiding, documenting everything, waiting for the moment when he might finally choose differently. Present day, Viktor's casino, North Tower. Sofia had been in the penthouse suite for 4 days, and she showed no signs of leaving. Viktor watched her from across the breakfast table as she ate with the precision of someone who'd learned to do everything carefully. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for comfort or attention. She simply existed in his space with the quiet acceptance of someone who'd already accepted the worst thing that could happen. "Tell me about your mother," Viktor said, pushing a glass of fresh juice toward her. Sofia set down her fork. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How she survived, where you lived, how she raised you." Sofia was silent for a moment, considering the question. "We moved constantly, different cities. Different countries, Rio, Buenos Aires, Lima, back to São Paulo. My mother said we were traveling for her work, but I understood eventually that we were hiding. She was careful about where we went, who we talked to, what we left behind." She paused, taking a sip of juice. "We ended up in Asuncion for the last 4 years. That's where she got sick. That's where I watched her get worse and worse until—" Sofia's voice didn't break, but something in her eyes dimmed. "Until she couldn't anymore." "How long were you alone with her body?" Viktor asked quietly. 2 weeks, Sofia said. Before the oracle came, he brought papers, he made arrangements. He told me that my mother's final instruction was that I come to you. Viktor leaned back in his chair. Every piece of information about the oracle made him more dangerous. Someone with resources to forge documents across multiple countries. Someone with the ability to coordinate a child's extraction and infiltration of his most secure location. Your mother left you in the care of someone you just met, Viktor said, not accusing, just observing. My mother left me in the care of someone she trusted, Sofia corrected. Someone who'd helped her escape when I was born, someone who's been protecting us since then. And does this oracle have a name? My mother called him the oracle, that's all I know. Viktor stood and walked to the library section of his office. He pulled out one of the journals that his security team had cataloged, leather-bound, filled with Isabella's handwriting. He opened it to a random page and began reading passages aloud. I can't go back. Even if Viktor wanted me to, even if he begged, I can't risk him finding us. He's in too deep now. He's chosen the organization over everything else, and that choice is poisoning him. I can see it in how he looked at me when he told me the lie. The man I loved is already dead. What's left is just a body still moving. Sofia listened, without interrupting. He turned to another entry, dated several years later. Sofia asked me today why her father doesn't visit. She's old enough now to understand that people have fathers. I told her the truth, that her father made a choice that meant he couldn't be in our lives. She asked if that meant he didn't love her. I told her that love and presence aren't always the same thing. Sometimes the people we love have to be far away to keep us safe. Viktor closed the journal. Your mother spent 15 years documenting her life in hiding, documenting you, and she spent all that time talking about me like I was a ghost. Because you were, Sofia said simply. You were dead to her, but she couldn't stop loving the memory of who you were. There was a knock at the office door. Marcelo entered, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was delivering bad news. Mr. Sokolov, Rodrigo is asking to meet with you. He's been asking repeatedly since the girl arrived. He's concerned about a security breach of this magnitude. Of course he was. Rodrigo was Viktor's second-in-command, his oldest friend in the organization, the man he'd brought into the business 20 years ago. If anyone would notice that something fundamental had changed, it would be Rodrigo. Tell him I'll see him in 1 hour, Viktor said. And Marcelo, where is the girl sleeping? North Tower Suite on the east side. She has everything she needs. Clothes, food, books. Add a security detail outside her room. No one goes near her without my approval. Absolute no one. Yes, sir. When Marcelo left, Sofia watched Viktor with unsettling calmness. Rodrigo doesn't like me, she said. How do you know that? Because he's wondering why you haven't killed me yet. Because in his world, a breach this significant would mean death. Because I'm a threat to the organization, and the organization is all he cares about. Viktor sat back down across from her. Your mother documented a lot about me, but she also left instructions, didn't she? The oracle mentioned information about the organization, about things that happened before I inherited it. Yes, Sofia confirmed. My mother found out things, bad things. She documented them. What kind of things? Sofia reached into her pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, unmarked except for a date written on the front. October 1997. My mother said you should read this when you were ready. She said it would explain everything. Viktor took the envelope, but he didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he looked at this small girl who'd somehow penetrated his fortress and upended his entire understanding of his own life. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. The organization doesn't forgive weakness. Your arrival here, the fact that I've allowed you to stay, this is being interpreted as a weakness. There are people in my organization who will want to use you against me. There are people who will see you as a problem that needs to be solved. I know, Sofia said. My mother explained that. She said you would have to choose, protect me or protect yourself. And what did she think I would choose? She thought you'd finally choose differently. The meeting with Rodrigo happened in the boardroom overlooking São Paulo's skyline. Viktor entered to find his second-in-command standing at the window, his posture tense with controlled fury. "We need to talk about the security breach," Rodrigo said without preamble. "A child walked into your vault through sealed doors. That shouldn't be possible. Someone on the inside helped her. Someone gave her access." "I know," Viktor said calmly. "And," Rodrigo turned to face him, his dark eyes searching Viktor's face for something he wasn't finding. "What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing." Rodrigo's expression shifted. "Excuse me." "I said I'm doing nothing. The girl stays. The investigation into how she got access is suspended." "Viktor, that's not. You can't just ignore a security breach of this magnitude. Every man in this organization will assume that you're vulnerable. They'll smell weakness." "Then they'll have to learn to live with it," Viktor said flatly. "The girl is my responsibility now." "Your responsibility." Rodrigo's voice rose slightly, something Viktor had rarely heard from him. "She's a child, a complete stranger who somehow penetrated your security, and you're protecting her." "She's not a stranger." The moment the words left his mouth, Viktor realized he'd made a mistake. Rodrigo's eyes sharpened with interest and suspicion. "What do you mean she's not a stranger? Who is she?" Viktor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied his second-in-command, the man he'd brought into the organization 2 decades ago, the man he'd trusted with his life, the man who suddenly seemed like a variable in an equation he didn't fully understand. "That," Viktor said slowly, "is information I'll share when I'm ready to share it." "And if the men ask questions," Rodrigo pushed, "if they want to know why we're harboring a child who bypassed our security, then you tell them it's not their concern. You tell them that if anyone so much as looks at her wrong, they answer to me, personally." Rodrigo was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice. "You're making a mistake, Viktor, and when this blows up in your face, I won't be able to protect you." "I didn't ask for protection," Viktor replied. "I asked for loyalty." "Loyalty to what? To a man who's protecting a mystery child. That's not loyalty, that's suicide." Rodrigo turned and walked toward the door. When he reached it, he paused. "The men are already talking," he said quietly. "They're saying you're compromised. They're saying you're vulnerable. And in this organization, vulnerability is an infection. It spreads, and it kills." After he left, Viktor stood alone in the boardroom, holding Sofia's sealed envelope, and understood with absolute clarity that he'd just declared war on his own organization. And he had no idea, yet, that the war had been coming for 15 years. The encrypted message arrived at 1:33 a.m. through channels that shouldn't exist. Viktor's computer security specialist, a man named Paulo, had built the system to be unbreakable. The message bypassing it meant something fundamental had changed. Viktor read it alone in his office, the sealed envelope from Isabella still unopened on his desk. "Mr. Sokolov, by now you've met Sofia. By now you understand that the woman you loved didn't die in 1997. By now you're beginning to understand that everything you believe about your rise through the organization is built on a foundation of lies. I'm writing to accelerate your education. My name is the Oracle. I've been documenting your organization for 15 years. I've been protecting Isabella and Sofia for 15 years. And I've been waiting for the right moment to contact you. That moment is now. Cardinal Ramirez didn't tell you the truth about anything. He didn't tell you that Isabella was alive. He didn't tell you that she was pregnant. And he didn't tell you about the scope of the operation you were helping him build. The organization you think you inherited isn't a crime syndicate. It's a trafficking network. For the last 20 years, Cardinal has been moving women and children through South America and into forced labor situations across multiple continents. Thousands of people, thousands of lives destroyed. And you, whether you knew it or not, you helped build that machine. I have documentation, medical records, transport manifests, financial records, photographs, testimony from survivors. Everything you need to understand exactly what you've been a part of. In 72 hours, I'm going to contact you with instructions for what happens next. You'll have a choice. You can turn over this information to federal authorities and testify against the organization. You can expose everything Cardinal built and ensure that the people responsible face justice. Or you can protect your empire and watch your daughter grow up knowing that her father chose power over morality. Either way, the truth is coming out. The only question is whether you're part of the solution or part of the problem. The Oracle. Viktor read the message 3 times. His hands didn't shake. His breathing remained controlled, but something fundamental in his chest had fractured. He pressed a button on his desk. Paulo appeared within minutes. I need to know everything, Viktor said quietly. Everything about the organization. I need financial records, operation manifests, anything that documents what we've been doing for the last decade. Bring it all to me. Sir, that's classified information. If someone sees you. I don't care, Viktor interrupted. Bring it now. For the next 12 hours, Viktor sat alone with documentation that painted a picture of horror. Vessel manifests showing transport routes through Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru. Financial records showing payments for labor placement services. Medical examinations of women before they were placed. Financial accounting for what women and children were worth when converted to profit. The math was meticulous. Cardinal had built a factory of human suffering, and Viktor's rise through the organization had been built on the bones of thousands of people. He found Sofia in the casino library, reading a book about Brazilian history. She looked up when he entered, her expression immediately registering his distress. You opened it, she said, the letter from the Oracle. A message, Viktor corrected. On my encrypted system, only someone inside the organization could send it there. Sofia set down her book. My mother said that would happen. She said the Oracle would contact you once I was safe. Your mother knew about this plan, Viktor asked, though he already knew the answer. She designed it, Sofia said simply. While she was sick, while she was dying. She spent her last months making sure everything was documented, everything was organized, everything was ready for when I came to you. Viktor sat across from her. The Oracle mentioned that I have a choice, that I can either turn the organization over to authorities or I can protect my empire. Did your mother have thoughts on which choice I should make? Sofia picked up her book again, and Viktor realized she was reading her mother's journals. Because that's what the books were, Isabella's documented thoughts, her life, her hopes and fears and instructions for her daughter. My mother wrote that the hardest choice is the one that costs you everything, Sofia said, reading aloud. She wrote that real love isn't protecting someone from consequences. Real love is accepting the consequences of your choices so that the person you love doesn't have to. Your mother was wise, Viktor said quietly. She was in pain, Sofia corrected, her child's voice carrying adult weight. She was dying and afraid and angry at you for becoming exactly the thing she was terrified you would become. But she still loved you. She loved you enough to create a plan to save you from yourself. That afternoon, Viktor called a meeting with his senior leadership. 12 men who'd built the organization with him, who'd benefited from the empire, who would fight to the death to protect it. He presented them with the same information the Oracle had presented to him. The room was silent when he finished. These documents are fabrications, one of the men said finally. Some kind of attack on the organization. I wish that were true, Viktor replied. But I've verified them. 3 of our transport managers have already confirmed the accuracy of these manifests. The organization is guilty of exactly what these documents describe. What are you saying? Rodrigo asked from his position at the table. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked like recognition, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I'm saying, Viktor said slowly, that Cardinal built this organization on human trafficking, and I've been complicit in that, whether I understood the full scope or not. So what? Another man said aggressively. We've all been complicit, we've all benefited. Are you suggesting we turn ourselves in? No, Viktor said. I'm suggesting that we have 72 hours before the Oracle releases this information to federal authorities. We have 72 hours to decide what kind of men we are. We're survivors, Rodrigo said quietly. We're men who did what it took to survive. That's a nice way to describe profiting from the enslavement of thousands of people, Viktor replied. I'm asking you to consider something different. The meeting ended in chaos. Half the men left to contact lawyers. Half the men left to start liquidating assets. And Rodrigo remained, watching Viktor with an expression that suggested he understood far more than he should. That night, another message arrived on Viktor's encrypted system. You called a meeting. You showed them the documentation. You told them the truth. That was exactly what needed to happen. The organization is beginning to fracture from the inside. Federal authorities are already aware of what's coming. They're preparing their case. But understand this, Cardinal isn't in São Paulo. He's in a compound in the mountains of Paraguay, protected by men who are loyal to him and entirely willing to die to keep him alive. He's aware that you've discovered the truth. He knows what's coming. And he's already decided what he's going to do about it. Protect your daughter, Viktor. Keep her close. Because in the next 72 hours, Cardinal is going to try to take from you the only thing that matters. Viktor closed the message and immediately went to Sofia's room. She was asleep, surrounded by her mother's journals, looking small and fragile and utterly defenseless. He sat beside her bed and understood with absolute clarity that the choice was no longer theoretical. It was immediate. It was life or death. And Cardinal Ramirez was coming. The investigator Viktor hired was named Patricia Montero, a former federal agent who'd gone private after becoming disgusted with institutional limitations. She worked from a secure location outside São Paulo, building her case against the Sokolov organization with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years putting criminals away. What she uncovered was worse than the encrypted messages had suggested. The trafficking network is continental, she told Viktor over a secure video call. We're talking about a systematic operation spanning 8 countries. Women and children are recruited, sometimes voluntarily, more often through deception, and moved through a network of safe houses and transport routes. Once they reach their destinations, their documents are confiscated and they're forced into labor. Sex work, factory work, domestic servitude. The organization makes roughly $60 million annually from this operation. Viktor listened without interrupting, though every word was a physical weight. I've verified the financial records, Patricia continued. Your organization has been liquidating assets over the past month. Someone inside is moving money, preparing for collapse. And something else, federal authorities have been investigating this operation for 5 years. They have an informant inside your organization, a high-level informant. Do you know who? Viktor asked. No, the FBI keeps that information compartmentalized. But whoever it is, they've been feeding information to the authorities for years. The case against Cardinal Ramirez alone is prosecution-ready. They're just waiting for the moment to move. After the call ended, Viktor sat in darkness and understood that the Oracle wasn't just someone trying to expose the organization. The Oracle was working with federal authorities. That night, the assassination attempt came. Viktor was escorting Sofia from the library to her room when the first explosion ripped through the east wing of the casino. The blast threw him forward, and he instinctively covered Sofia, shielding her body with his own as glass and debris rained down around them. For a moment, there was only ringing silence. Then gunfire erupted from multiple positions in the building. Go, Viktor commanded Marcelo, who appeared from the smoke like a ghost. Get her out, now. Sir, we need to. No arguments. Take her to the backup location. The safe house in the Vila Mariana district. Don't stop. Don't trust anyone. Sofia grabbed his arm. You're coming with us. I have to stay. I have to slow them down, buy you time. No, Sofia said, and her voice carried the absolute certainty of a child who'd already lost everything and refused to lose more. My mother didn't send me to you so I could lose you too. We leave together or we don't leave at all. The building shook as another explosion hit the west corridor. Whoever was attacking had military-grade explosives and inside knowledge of the casino's layout. Viktor made a choice that his old self would never have made. He ran with his daughter. Marcelo led them through service corridors, avoiding the main exits. They made it to the basement parking garage just as the main elevators exploded in a cascade of fire. Viktor shielded Sofia as they ran toward the armored vehicle, bullets ricocheting off concrete walls. The drive through São Paulo's night streets felt like crossing into another world. Viktor kept looking in the mirrors, waiting to see headlights pursuing them, but the attacks stopped the moment they left the building. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Vila Mariana, protected by security Viktor had established years ago for situations exactly like this. Sofia collapsed onto a sofa, shaking, while Viktor checked the perimeter. "Is anyone else coming?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Viktor replied honestly. "That attack was professional, coordinated. It came from inside." "The Oracle?" Sofia asked. "No, the Oracle was protecting you. The attack came from Cardinal, or someone trying to prevent us from going to authorities." Sofia stood and walked to a locked cabinet where Viktor kept emergency documents. She opened it, somehow knowing the combination, and pulled out a sealed USB drive. "My mother left this," Sofia said. "She said if things went wrong, if we had to run, I should give this to you." Viktor plugged the drive into a laptop. Files appeared, documents, photographs, financial records, but also a video file dated 3 weeks before Isabella's death. He clicked it. Isabella appeared on screen, her face thinner than in the photographs Viktor had seen, but her eyes still holding that same quiet intensity. She was in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and she was looking directly at the camera as if she could see through 15 years of separation to speak directly to Viktor. "If you're watching this," Isabella began, her voice still carrying the musicality of her youth despite her illness, "it means Sofia reached you. It means you're finally understanding what happened. And it means, Viktor, that you're faced with the choice you should have made in 1997. She paused, gathering strength for the next words. "I'm not going to tell you that you're a good man. We both know you're not. You've spent 15 years building something monstrous. You've benefited from suffering. You've made choices that destroyed lives. And I hate that. I hate what you became." She coughed, waited a moment, and continued. "But I also know that you're the man who sat in theaters and listened to my words about justice. The man who asked me to run away. The man who kissed me under São Paulo's stars and told me he wanted something different. That man is still in there, buried so deep you probably don't remember him. But he's there." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I've spent 15 years documenting what you built. Not to destroy you, but to save you. Because the only way out of that organization is through exposure. The only way you become something other than what Cardinal made you is by facing exactly what you've done and choosing differently." She reached toward the camera, her hand trembling. "Sofia is your redemption, Viktor. Not from your crimes, nothing redeems those. But she's your first real choice. She's your chance to be the man I believed you could be. The man who chooses love over power, who chooses protection over the empire." Isabella's breathing was labored now, but she forced the final words. "There's a man you work with, someone you trust. His name is Rodrigo Ferreira. He's Cardinal's younger brother, but he's been helping me for years. He's the Oracle. He's been building the case against Cardinal with federal authorities. Trust him, work with him, and for the first time in your life, choose something that costs you everything." The video ended. Viktor sat in silence, the weight of Isabella's dying message settling over him like concrete. "Your mother," he said slowly, "knew that Rodrigo was Cardinal's brother." "She knew everything," Sofia said. "She had access to information through the journalism community. She spent 15 years building a network to document the organization, and she chose to trust Rodrigo with that information because she believed he was different from his uncle. And the Oracle is..." "Rodrigo," Sofia confirmed. My mother's protector, your FBI informant, the person who orchestrated everything, my escape, the documentation, the federal investigation. Viktor's phone rang, an encrypted number he didn't recognize. He answered to hear Rodrigo's voice for the first time since the casino attack. "Viktor," Rodrigo said quietly, "we need to talk about what happens next, and we need to talk about whether you're ready to bring down everything you've built." "Where are you?" Viktor asked. "Closer than you think," Rodrigo replied. "And Mr. Sokolov, I'm sorry about the casino, but Cardinal just declared war, which means the choice isn't theoretical anymore. It's immediate. It's survival." The line went dead. Viktor looked at his daughter, this impossible child who'd walked into his vault with a photograph and a purpose, and understood that everything he'd built was about to collapse. And for the first time in his life, the prospect of losing his empire felt like the possibility of saving himself. If Viktor's journey from empire to accountability has moved you, if you felt the weight of his choices, the possibility of redemption, the moment when power finally becomes secondary to love, we want to hear from you. Because this is the turning point. This is the moment where a man has to choose between everything he built and the one person worth building for. Like this video if you believe that change is possible, even for people who have done terrible things. Subscribe to our channel because we tell stories about transformation, about the cost of choices, about the people who bet their lives on the possibility of redemption. Comment below and tell us, do you think Viktor can actually change? Can a man who profited from human trafficking find redemption? And most importantly, what would you choose if you had to give up your entire empire to save your daughter? Your thoughts matter, because these are the questions that define us. These are the moments where we discover who we really are. We'll read every comment. We value your perspective, and we can't wait to see what you think happens next. We'll see you in the next chapter. The apartment was in Paraisópolis, one of São Paulo's largest favelas, the kind of place where Viktor Sokolov's organization would never think to look because men like him never looked down. The walls were cinder block, the windows barred, the neighbors suspicious of anyone new. It was perfect. Viktor paid cash for 2 months and kept the paperwork minimal. The landlord didn't ask questions. People in this neighborhood understood that everyone was running from something. For 3 days, they didn't leave. Viktor had Marcelo bring supplies, food, clothes, a laptop with military-grade encryption. They existed in a kind of suspended reality, watching news reports of the casino explosion on a small television with a crackling antenna. The official story was a gas leak, 7 security guards killed, a tragic accident that would be investigated thoroughly. No mention of Viktor or Sofia. On the 4th night, Sofia's composure finally broke. She'd been sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the barred window at the narrow streets below, when the trembling started. Not the physical shaking of someone cold, but the deep, bone-level shaking that comes from a child's nervous system finally processing the reality of what it had survived. Viktor was heating water for tea, simple food. Nothing elaborate when he heard the sound. Not crying, something worse. The sound of someone trying to cry but unable to find the release. He found her curled on the bed, her body rigid, her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. "Sofia," he said quietly, sitting beside her, "look at me." She didn't. She kept staring at the wall with an intensity that suggested if she looked away, something terrible would become real. "My mother is dead," she said, her voice fractured. "She's dead, and I'm 9 years old, and I'm hiding in a terrible apartment in a terrible city, and my father is a criminal, and people are trying to kill us, and my mother is dead, and I'm never going to see her again, and—" She couldn't finish. The words broke into something that was half sob, half scream, the sound of a child's grief finally exceeding her capacity to contain it. Viktor held her while she fell apart. He didn't try to comfort her with words or promises. He simply held her and let her break, because sometimes that's the only thing a broken person can do for another broken person, witness their shattering and not look away. When the worst of it passed, When Sofia was exhausted and hollow-eyed, she spoke in a whisper. "I was supposed to make you choose differently," she said. "That was my job. My mother wrote that down in her journals. I was supposed to show you the proof, and you were supposed to choose me over the organization. But everything is still broken. You're still hunted. I'm still an orphan. My mother's dead, and nothing is fixed." "No," Viktor said quietly. "It's not fixed, but we're alive, and we're together, and we're going to testify against the organization. We're going to make sure that what your mother documented gets used to bring down the people who destroyed her life." "But my mother is still dead," Sofia said, and the simple truth of it hung between them. "Yes," Viktor acknowledged. "She is, and nothing I do will change that. Nothing will bring her back, but I can honor her by choosing to be different, and that's what she asked me to do." On the 5th night, Rodrigo came to them. He arrived at midnight, moving through Parasopolis's narrow streets like he belonged there, like the poverty and danger were just details to navigate. He looked different in person than Viktor remembered, older, worn, like a man who'd spent 15 years carrying secrets that were slowly crushing him. Sofia answered the door without fear. She'd understood somehow that Rodrigo wasn't a threat, that he was the piece of her mother's plan that would finally move them toward resolution. "We need to move soon," Rodrigo said without preamble. "Cardinal knows you're in São Paulo. He has people searching the city. It's only a matter of time before someone finds this place." "Then what do you suggest?" Viktor asked. "Federal authorities," Rodrigo replied. "You contact the FBI, you turn yourself in, you become a witness in exchange for protection." "And Sofia?" "She stays in witness protection with you. But Viktor, understand what this means. You're going to prison. You're going to testify against men you've worked with for 20 years. Men who will want to kill you. Men inside the prison system who have reach. This isn't freedom. It's trading one kind of captivity for another." "But it's the right choice," Viktor said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes," Rodrigo confirmed. "Your mother understood that," he said to Sofia. "She spent 15 years accepting that the only way out was through. She couldn't escape her disease, but you could escape this. And your father can escape his past, but only if he chooses it." Viktor looked at this man, Cardinal's own brother, the person his uncle had raised, the man who'd chosen to betray his family to stop the trafficking operation. He understood that Rodrigo had been making the choice to change for longer than Viktor had. "Why?" Viktor asked him. "Why did you become the oracle? Why did you turn against your uncle?" Rodrigo was quiet for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 15 years with a secret that consumed him. "Because I was 17 when I first learned what the organization really did. My uncle told me about it like it was a business opportunity. He said I should be proud that I came from a family with that kind of power. And for years I was proud, and I was complicit, and I was a coward." He paused, looking at Sofia. "Then I met a woman. She was being transported through one of our networks. She managed to escape momentarily, and I found her hiding in a warehouse. She told me what my uncle had done to her, and something in me fractured. I couldn't unknow what she'd told me. I couldn't go back to pretending it was just business." "What happened to her?" Sofia asked. "She survived," Rodrigo said. "She escaped the country. She built a new life. But she also told me about an organization that was documenting human trafficking, and I contacted them, and I became their informant." He looked at Viktor. "Your lover, Isabella, she was the one who connected me with the federal network. She understood that I wanted to destroy my uncle's organization from the inside. She became my guide, the person who kept me sane while I was pretending to be loyal to Cardinal." The revelation hung between them. "She loved you," Rodrigo said to Viktor. "Even after you abandoned her, even while watching you build the organization that destroyed thousands of lives. She still believed you could change, and she spent 15 years building the infrastructure to make that change possible." "How long until they come?" Viktor asked. "Hours, maybe less. Cardinal has sent people through the neighborhood. They're searching methodically." "Then we need to leave," Viktor said. He looked at Sofia. Pack only what you can carry. We're going to the FBI. We're going to tell them everything. And we're going to make sure that your mother's sacrifice means something." Sofia nodded and went to gather her things, the journals, the USB drive, the few clothes they'd brought. She moved with the efficiency of a 9-year-old who understood that survival meant preparation. As Rodrigo moved toward the door to scout the exit route, Viktor called after him. "Why are you helping us, after everything?" "Because Isabella asked me to," Rodrigo replied. "And because she was right. You can change. People can change. All it takes is understanding exactly what you've done and choosing to be different anyway." He stepped into the hallway and looked back. 3 minutes, be ready. Viktor heard the voices from the street below. Men calling out names. Men with guns, systematically moving through the neighborhood. Men sent by Cardinal Ramirez to ensure that his empire would never be threatened by testimony. But they were minutes away, and Rodrigo was here, and Sofia was ready. And for the first time, Viktor Sokolov was choosing something worth more than power. He was choosing to save the people Cardinal would destroy. He was choosing to bring down the empire. He was choosing his daughter. The FBI field office was in a converted warehouse in the Pineros district, far from the gleaming governmental buildings where normal bureaucracy happened. This was where the dirty work occurred, where deals were made with criminals, where futures were bargained, where men made impossible choices. Special Agent Daniel Cardoso was waiting for them. He was a man in his early 50s with the bearing of someone who'd seen too many organizations destroyed and too many victims never find justice. When Viktor walked in with Sofia and Rodrigo, Cardoso's expression didn't change. He'd been expecting this. "Mr. Sokolov," Cardoso said, extending his hand. "I'm Special Agent Cardoso. We have a lot to discuss about your cooperation and the protection we can offer your daughter." Viktor didn't shake his hand. Instead, he turned to Rodrigo. "Before we do anything," Viktor said quietly, "we need to talk, alone." Cardoso looked like he wanted to object, but something in Viktor's expression made him nod to the other agents. They left, taking Sofia with them. She went without resistance, understanding that her father needed to have this conversation without her present. When they were alone, Viktor sat across from Rodrigo and studied the man who'd been orchestrating events for 15 years. "You've been playing me," Viktor said flatly. "Yes," Rodrigo replied without hesitation. "From the moment you met Isabella, I knew about the romance because Isabella told me. I watched you make the choice to abandon her, and then I spent 15 years putting together the evidence that would force you to choose differently." "Why?" Viktor's voice was controlled, but underneath it was the sound of betrayal. "Because you were my friend," Rodrigo said. "Because watching you become exactly the man Cardinal wanted you to be was like watching someone commit suicide in slow motion. And because Isabella believed you were worth saving." "But you orchestrated everything," Viktor continued. "You arranged for Sofia to reach me. You fed information to the FBI. You coordinated the attack on the casino." "Cardinal coordinated the attack," Rodrigo corrected. "I arranged for you and Sofia to escape. There's a difference." "Is there?" Viktor asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've manipulated every choice I've made since Sofia arrived." "Yes," Rodrigo said simply. "I manipulated you. I gave you a daughter and forced you to confront what you'd become. And I knew that if you were the man I believed you could be, you would eventually choose the right thing. But I couldn't leave that choice to chance. Too many people were dying. Too many victims would never get justice if you continued running your empire." Viktor stood and walked to the window. Through it, he could see the Pineros skyline, the dividing line between worlds, between lives, between who he'd been and who he was becoming. "If I testify," Viktor said, "I'm going to prison." "Yes," Rodrigo confirmed. "I'll spend years in a cell. Men inside will want to kill me. Cardinal will want to kill me. I'll lose everything." "Yes," Rodrigo said again. "And you believe that's justice?" "I believe it's accountability," Rodrigo replied. "For you, for the organization, for everyone who profited from human trafficking. The only way this ends is if you testify. The only way Cardinal goes down is if you're willing to speak about what you built with him." Viktor turned back to face his oldest friend. "You should have just told me the truth from the beginning," Viktor said, "instead of manipulating me." "Would you have listened?" Rodrigo asked. "Or would you have killed me and buried the evidence and continued your empire?" Viktor didn't answer because they both knew the truth. "I'm sorry," Rodrigo said, "but I'm not sorry for orchestrating Sofia's arrival. I'm not sorry for pushing you toward this choice, because the alternative was watching thousands more people suffer while you built your wealth on their bones." Viktor's testimony began 3 days later. He sat in a federal courtroom and for the first time articulated the reality of what he'd built. He described the trafficking networks. He named operatives. He provided access to financial records that showed decades of profit from human suffering. He spoke about Cardinal Ramirez's vision for the organization and how it had evolved from simple organized crime into something far more systematic and evil. The prosecutor was relentless, pushing him to remember details, to be specific, to ensure that every crime was documented and prosecutable. But the defense attorney was worse. She attacked him, suggested he was a liar, implied that his testimony was motivated by revenge against his organization. She called him a criminal trying to reduce his sentence by testifying against others. Everything she said was true. And Viktor answered honestly about every bit of it. "Yes, I'm a criminal. Yes, I profited from trafficking. Yes, I'm complicit in thousands of crimes. Yes, I'm testifying to reduce my own sentence. And yes, that makes my testimony unreliable by every measure except one. It's the truth." His testimony lasted 4 days. By the end, there was no question that Cardinal Ramirez was guilty of a systematic human trafficking operation that spanned multiple countries and multiple decades. The arrests began immediately. Viktor watched from a secure location as federal authorities moved through São Paulo, apprehending members of his organization. Men he'd worked with for 20 years, men who'd fought alongside him, men who'd built empires with him. They were taken into custody one by one. Marcelo was arrested at his home. Paulo, the security specialist, was taken at his office. Dozens of operatives, managers, and facilitators, all arrested within hours. And then came the announcement that made it official. Cardinal Ramirez, age 76, had been arrested in a compound in the mountains of Paraguay, attempting to flee the country. He was extradited to Brazil to face charges of racketeering, human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Viktor's empire, the empire he'd spent 20 years building, collapsed in a single day. That night, Rodrigo visited him in the safe house, where he was being kept before transfer to a federal facility. "How are you holding up?" Rodrigo asked. "I'm about to spend the next 14 years in prison," Viktor replied. "How do you think I'm holding up?" "Better than you deserve to be," Rodrigo said. "Which is what I'm trying to tell you. The prosecutor has agreed to recommend a reduced sentence in exchange for your cooperation. You're looking at maybe 10 to 12 years instead of life. You'll get out while you're still young enough to have a life afterward." "What about you?" Viktor asked. "I'm accepting immunity from prosecution in exchange for my testimony and my service as an informant," Rodrigo replied. "But I'm done. I'm leaving the business. I'm going to disappear and try to build something that doesn't cause pain." Viktor stood and embraced his oldest friend. It was the first time he'd acknowledged that despite everything, despite the manipulation, despite the orchestration, despite the betrayal, Rodrigo had done what Viktor couldn't have done on his own. He'd forced Viktor toward redemption. "Thank you," Viktor said quietly. "Don't thank me," Rodrigo replied. "Thank Isabella. She was the one who believed you could change. I just set up the circumstances and hoped she was right." When Rodrigo left, Viktor was alone with his thoughts and the knowledge that tomorrow he would be transferred to a federal prison to await trial. His empire was gone. His freedom was gone. But Sofia was safe. The victims of his organization would have their day in court. The trafficking networks were being dismantled. And for the first time in his life, Viktor Sokolov understood that losing everything might be the only way to gain something worth having. 18 months later, the coastal town of Geruja was unremarkable, the kind of place where tourists came to disappear and locals asked no questions about newcomers. Viktor lived in a modest apartment overlooking the Atlantic, working as a consultant for a criminal justice nonprofit that was, in reality, a front for his ongoing cooperation with federal authorities. His new name was Viktor Marchesi. He'd been assigned a past by the Witness Protection Program, a Brazilian accountant, divorced, estranged from family. It was vague enough to deflect curiosity and close enough to his real expertise to seem plausible. His wealth was gone. The accounts had been seized and liquidated. Billions of reais, blood money, every real of it, redistributed to trafficking victims through victim compensation funds. He lived on a modest government stipend, roughly $1,500 per month, enough to survive, enough to ensure that he would never again have the resources to build an empire. But more importantly, enough to understand what normal people's lives actually felt like. Sofia was 12 years old now. She lived with him, attended school under a false name, had learned to laugh again. The transition from child of a dying mother to daughter of an imprisoned father hadn't been easy, but Sofia possessed something that most people never developed: the understanding that her survival was her responsibility, and that responsibility was something to be proud of. "Dad, I got a scholarship," Sofia announced, dropping her backpack by the door. She'd started calling him Dad about 8 months into their new life. Not Viktor, not the man who'd built empires, but Dad, the person who picked her up from school and helped with homework and made sure she ate vegetables. "A scholarship?" Viktor asked, genuinely interested. He'd learned that fatherhood meant actually being present in the small moments. "For boarding school in Chile," Sofia continued, settling onto the kitchen stool. "They have a program for students interested in human rights law, full scholarship, room and board covered. I'd leave next fall." Viktor felt something in his chest contract, but he kept his expression steady. "That's incredible news. Have you decided?" "I want to go," Sofia said. "I want to study. I want to understand how to help people the way my mother tried to help people, the way Rodrigo helped people, the way you're trying to help people now." She paused, sitting across from her father at their small kitchen table. "Mom wrote that the biggest gift you can give someone is believing they're capable of change. I want to spend my life giving that gift to people who have been trapped by systems. I want to be a lawyer who helps trafficking victims get justice." Viktor understood that his daughter had transcended him. She wasn't just surviving her past, she was transforming it into purpose. The trauma that had shaped her childhood was becoming the fuel for a life dedicated to preventing that trauma in others. "Then you should apply," he said. "You should be exactly who you want to become." That evening, Viktor attended his weekly therapy session with Dr. Marina Costa, a psychologist working through the same nonprofit. The sessions had started as a requirement of his witness protection agreement, but they'd evolved into something more genuine. "How are you managing the guilt?" Dr. Costa asked, as she did most weeks. "It's not something you manage," Viktor replied. "It's something you live with. Every day I wake up understanding that decisions I made destroyed thousands of people's lives. That understanding doesn't fade." "But you've channeled that understanding into something productive," Dr. Costa noted. "You're consulting with federal authorities to dismantle trafficking operations across South America. You're helping victims access compensation funds. You're rebuilding your relationship with your daughter." "I'm serving a 12-year sentence while technically living free," Viktor said. "That's not redemption. That's just a different kind of prison." "Yes," Dr. Costa agreed, "but it's a prison you're building with intention, not one built for you by someone else. That matters." On a Saturday morning, Viktor took Sofia to visit Isabella's grave. They'd arranged for Isabella to be reburied in Brazil, in a small cemetery outside Santos. The funeral had been private, just Viktor, Sofia, and Rodrigo. The headstone was simple. "Isabella Marchetti, 1969-2024. She spoke truth to power." I bring her flowers every month, Sofia said, placing a bouquet of white carnations, Isabella's favorite, against the stone. I talk to her about school and things I'm learning. I tell her about you getting better at being a father. Do you think she can hear you? Viktor asked. No, Sofia said practically. But I think saying things out loud makes them real. That's what my mother taught me. Words have power. They sat in silence for a while, the Atlantic breeze carrying salt air and the sound of distant waves. Viktor was struck, not for the first time, by how completely Sofia had accepted the complexity of her life. She didn't demand that her father be entirely good or entirely bad. She simply accepted that he was a man attempting to become something different. Mom wrote about you in her journals, Sofia said. Things she never told you while she was alive. She wrote about how she fell in love with you the moment she saw you in that theater, how she knew even then that you were capable of choosing darkness. But she also knew you were capable of choosing light. And which did I choose? Viktor asked. Both, Sofia said. You chose darkness for 20 years, and now you're choosing light. That's not redemption, it's just being human. Mom said redemption was for people who believed in the possibility of being saved. She said what we all really need is the possibility of changing. The work with federal authorities continued steadily. Viktor provided detailed intelligence on trafficking operations across South America. He helped identify hidden networks, financial flows, and processing centers. His information led to 52 arrests across 6 countries. More than 250 trafficking victims were rescued. Federal prosecutors had offered him early release several times, arguing that his cooperation exceeded the requirements of his plea agreement. Viktor had declined each offer. I need to serve my time, he'd told Agent Cardoso. Not for redemption, but for accountability. If I walk free while my victims are still healing, what message does that send? On the anniversary of Isabella's death, Viktor received a letter. It had been held by his lawyer and only released now, per Isabella's instructions. The envelope was sealed and labeled, "For Viktor, to be opened 1 year after my death." He opened it alone in his apartment, while Sofia was at school. Inside was a letter in Isabella's handwriting. Viktor, if you're reading this, it means a year has passed since I died. It means you're still alive. It means you're still choosing, still becoming, still trying. I'm writing this from a hospital bed. I'm in pain. I'm afraid. I'm angry at you for becoming what you became. But I'm also proud of you for the man you were before that and hopeful about the man you might become after. You asked me once what love meant. I told you it was choosing someone again and again, even when they disappoint you. I've chosen you 1,000 times. I chose you when you abandoned me. I chose you while raising our daughter alone. I chose you while I was dying. And I'm choosing you now in writing this letter for you to read after I'm gone. Viktor, you don't deserve redemption. None of us do, really. But you deserve the possibility of change. Sofia deserves a father who understands that his past doesn't define his future. And the victims of your organization deserve to know that the man who helped destroy them is now working to save others. I'm giving you that possibility through Sofia, through my documentation, through Rodrigo, through this letter. Be the man I believed you could be. Not for me, I'll be gone, but for yourself, and for our daughter. Love, Isabella. Viktor read the letter 3 times, sitting in darkness, understanding finally that Isabella's forgiveness wasn't about absolving him of guilt. It was about insisting that guilt didn't have to be permanent, that accountability could lead to change. That even men who'd built empires on suffering could choose differently. When Sofia came home from school, Viktor embraced her, not as a criminal holding a hostage, but as a father holding his daughter. Your mother left me a letter, he said. She wanted me to know that she believed in my ability to change. She believed in a lot of things, Sofia replied. Most of them turned out to be true. That night, as he tucked Sofia into bed, Viktor understood something fundamental. His empire was truly gone. Not just seized and destroyed, but replaced with something incomparably more valuable, a real life. One moment at a time, one choice at a time, one daughter at a time. 2 years later, Viktor stood on the balcony of his apartment overlooking the Atlantic Ocean and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd thought about money. Not because he didn't need it. The $2,000 monthly stipend from witness protection was a genuine constraint, but because acquiring more had stopped being the central organizing principle of his existence. He was 54 years old. His hair was graying at the temples. The lines around his eyes were deeper, carved by years of guilt and processing. But when he looked in the mirror now, he recognized the face staring back at him. It was his own, not the constructed image of a crime boss, not the desperate performance of a man trying to be untouchable, but simply the face of someone learning to be human. Sofia was 13 now. She'd grown taller, her mind sharper, her understanding of the world more complex. She excelled in school. She had friends. She'd joined a debate team, channeling some inherited eloquence into advocacy for justice. She was thriving in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago when she was the 9-year-old girl breaking into his vault. That afternoon, she came home from school with news. "I'm applying to a boarding school in Chile," she announced. "Santiago, they have a program for students interested in human rights law." Viktor felt something in his chest contract. "You want to leave?" "I want to study," Sofia corrected. "I want to understand how to help people the way my mother tried to help people, the way Rodrigo helped people, the way you're trying to help people now." She paused, sitting across from her father at their small kitchen table overlooking the ocean. "Mom wrote that the biggest gift you can give someone is believing they're capable of change. I want to spend my life giving that gift to people who have been trapped by systems. I want to be a lawyer who helps trafficking victims get justice." Viktor understood that his daughter had transcended him. She wasn't just surviving her past, she was transforming it into purpose. The trauma that had shaped her childhood was becoming the fuel for a life dedicated to preventing that trauma in others. "Then you should apply," he said. "You should be exactly who you want to become." The letter from Rodrigo arrived 2 weeks later. It had been redirected through official channels, federal authorities monitoring correspondence from incarcerated individuals. Viktor opened it with complicated emotions. Rodrigo was serving a 7-year sentence, having accepted a reduced plea deal in exchange for his cooperation and testimony about his uncle's organization. He'd been in a minimum security facility in Brasilia for 2 years. "Viktor, I'm writing because I needed to know how you're doing. Not through official reports or witness protection check-ins, but in your own words. I've had a lot of time to think in here. Time to process what I did, manipulating Sofia's arrival, orchestrating your exposure, playing chess with your life like it was a game I had the right to control. I told myself it was justified. That saving thousands of trafficking victims was worth the betrayal of a single friendship. I'm not sure that math was correct. Isabella believed you could change. I believed in the possibility of your change. But I never asked whether you wanted to change. I just forced the choice and hoped you'd make the right decision. That's not redemption. That's just a different kind of control. I'm writing to ask your forgiveness, not expecting to receive it, but needing you to know that I understand what I did. I understand that I was a friend who betrayed your trust, and I'm accepting the consequences of that betrayal. They tell me you're doing well in witness protection, that Sofia is thriving, that you're consulting with federal authorities to dismantle trafficking operations. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. If you ever want to visit, I'm at the Brasilia facility. They allow visitors, but I understand completely if you never want to see me again. Rodrigo. Viktor read the letter 3 times. His first instinct was anger. Rodrigo had orchestrated everything, forced every choice, controlled his path toward redemption. But his second instinct was understanding. Rodrigo hadn't been wrong about the need for Viktor to change. He'd just been wrong about the right to force that change. He showed the letter to Sofia. "Are you going to visit him?" she asked. "I don't know," Viktor replied honestly. "He forced my redemption. That's not something you just forgive." "No," Sofia agreed. "But understanding is different from forgiving, and Rodrigo is asking for understanding, not forgiveness. 3 years after his testimony, Viktor received word that his appeal for early release had been approved. He'd served 5 years of his 12-year sentence, but federal authorities' requests for his continued cooperation had become less urgent as the trafficking networks were systematically dismantled. The judge approved his release with conditions: continued cooperation with authorities, continued residence in Brazil, continued monthly check-ins with federal agents. Viktor was 55 years old, and he was being offered freedom. He sat alone in his apartment and realized that freedom meant something entirely different now than it had in his criminal years. Then, freedom meant the ability to do whatever he wanted without consequence. Now, freedom meant the ability to choose accountability, to choose his daughter, to choose meaningful work. He called Sofia, who was in her first year at boarding school in Santiago, studying international human rights law. "I'm getting released," he told her. "Good," Sofia said simply. "You've served your time, you've done the work, and there's still so much to do." "What do you mean?" "Mom wrote that we don't get to decide when our work is finished. We only get to decide to keep showing up. You've shown up. Now you get to keep showing up, just with more freedom to do it." That night, Viktor stood on his balcony and looked out at the Atlantic. The water that had been a backdrop to his witness protection life now felt like something else, a boundary between who he'd been and who he'd become. He wasn't redeemed. The victims of his organization would never get back what he'd taken from them. His crimes had destroyed lives that could never be fully restored. But he'd spent 5 years doing the work of accountability. He'd spent 5 years raising his daughter and learning to be a father. He'd spent 5 years helping federal authorities rescue trafficking victims and dismantle networks across multiple countries. The chains that had bound him weren't physical anymore. They were internal: the weight of accountability, the commitment to continue the work, the choice to remain constrained by his own conscience rather than by legal requirement. And as he stood looking at the water, watching sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Viktor Sokolov understood that this simple moment of peace, this ability to be present with the consequences of his past while building something different in his future, this was what real freedom looked like. Not escape, not redemption, but the genuine possibility of change. And in that possibility, in that choice made every day, he was finally truly unchained.